Hey everybody, it's Matt here from pianoblog.com. This is the second in a two-part video on what to do if you get nervous or anxious in piano lessons. And in the first video, I talked a lot about what to do if maybe it's more on the teacher end of things, like if you have a mean teacher, you feel like there's a personality mismatch. And in this video, I'm going to talk more about what to do if you think it's more just that you're a nervous person in general, that maybe you get wound up a little bit tight. And really, usually it can be a little bit of both, so it can be a little bit difficult. But if you haven't seen that last video, you might want to go check it out. So the first thing to note is that most people get nervous. It would actually be strange if you didn't get nervous in a situation where you're asked to do something complex in front of someone you don't know, especially if it's the first few lessons. So we need to distinguish between the type of person who gets so nervous that every week is just something that they're really not looking forward to, that they feel like it's just going to be a disaster, that they go into every lesson with their hands shaking and sweating and stuff like that. That would be something that's much more of an outlier than someone who gets a little bit anxious when they go into their lesson. So let's go ahead and just deal first with the 99% of people, which is, you know, maybe they're very nervous at the first lesson or two, but after a month or two of lessons, they kind of get to know the teacher, and they might get a little anxious depending on the scenario. But in general, it's a pleasant experience, but they'd still kind of like to take the edge off because, you know, maybe you don't feel like you're playing up to as well as you can. So in that sort of scenario, I call that that's like your normal nervousness, your normal anxiousness. There are a couple things that I found really helpful. So the first thing to find helpful is once you're in that state of being nervous or anxious, just focusing on that and hoping it goes away, from what I found, and you may find differently, but from what I found, does absolutely nothing to make it go away. And in many cases, it makes it worse. It's sort of like when you tell someone to calm down or someone tells you to calm down. It doesn't make you calmer. You actually get more pissed off. So it's sort of the same thing with nervousness. If you're already feeling that sort of physiological response, just looking at your shaking hands or you're sweating and saying stop shaking or stop sweating or don't feel nervous right now, that's not going to do anything. So one thing that's really helped me in terms of dealing with those sort of emotions is a lot of mindfulness practice, a lot of meditation, and learning to accept that I feel that way. That sometimes I'm going to feel totally calm, and the other times I'm going to be on edge, and it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be that I drank too much coffee, you know, for all I know. It could be a lot of things. And to learn a lot of mindfulness and meditation type practice, if you do it routinely, and I don't want to be on a soapbox here because I'm in no means some sort of monk or guru, but I found for myself that it's let me step back a little bit when I feel myself getting on edge. It doesn't make the feelings go away, but it gives me some perspective so that I'm able to accept that they're there, kind of observe them, and then continue on with what I'm trying to do. In this case, with my lesson or with playing. And I think a lot of performers will tell you this. It's not that the nervousness goes away, it's that you kind of learn how to deal with it. Deal with it not in the sense of white knuckling it, but deal with it in the sense of you learn to observe it and you say, okay, I'm nervous and I'm just going to play anyway. And there are a couple kind of related observations here. The first is that I found myself just through introspection, and I'm not going to pretend to be a scientist in this regard, but just through introspection, I found that the part of my mind that plays the piano is very different than the part of my mind that analyzes things. So if I'm wound up tight and I'm nervous and I'm trying to play the piano, or even if I'm just in a lesson scenario or whatever, analyzing what I'm doing will actually interrupt that part of my mind that plays. So if I'm nervous and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm nervous, what's next, what note's next, etc., etc., I'm actually screwing myself up. And so it's more helpful if I've practiced a piece, if I'm ready to perform, especially if I can step back and let that part of my mind just do its thing without that kind of nervous, calculating mind interrupting the process. So that's a little aside, but something to think about. Just to understand that anxiety, if it's making you attend to detail suddenly, probably isn't helping. So learning to observe it and then let yourself kind of play in spite of it, or just while it's going on, accepting it, is a very, very helpful thing. Okay, so that's how I would approach that sort of scenario. And the other observation that I was going to make is if you have this kind of moderate level of anxiety, as long as it's not making you completely miserable in your lessons, you can use this as something to work on your broader performing ability. And what I mean by that is you can use that slight anxiety you feel in lessons as sort of a microcosm of what it would be like to perform for more people. And this is why most performers that I know, before they perform in public, will get a group of friends together to play for each other, just to kind of get them a little bit on edge so that they can see what that's like. And you can start to use this sort of lesson scenario as a way to accept the fact that you feel nervous, accept the physiological responses, and then learn to perform in spite of them. And that's going to be really helpful as you gear up for performance type situations, if you find that helpful. Another thing you can do that you'll find really helpful going into a lesson is simulating playing for someone else. You can play for a friend or a spouse or someone, have them come into the room, play for that person, just to see what that's like. One thing I used to do a lot of times to get myself just a little on edge, and I still recommend to my students, is I would videotape myself. It might seem dumb, but try it. Put a camera on, and you'll find that you'll become a little more self-conscious, put you a little bit on edge. And if you do that several times during the week, going into the lesson is going to feel completely different, because it's just going to feel like, oh, I've kind of been this self-conscious before going into this. So you can, besides just kind of generally preparing with mindfulness and having that mindset, you can prepare by simulating that experience. I think you might find that very helpful. So I'm sure there are more suggestions, but those are the ones that kind of immediately come to mind. The one thing I want to finish with is kind of these sort of outlier situation. I have had a couple of students, and only a couple, and only in 20 or so years of teaching, that for them the response that they would have coming into the lessons was so nerve-wracking that it made actually the teaching of the lesson impossible. Now, at your first lesson, it's normal to be quite nervous, especially if you're an adult and you haven't had lessons in a while. But if after a month or two of lessons, you're still going in and finding that it's literally unbearable, like you feel as though you're almost going to die or something. In that case, you might be having something a little bit off the normal spectrum in terms of response. And so you want to be honest with yourself. If it's just a little bit of anxiety, that's no reason to take drastic measures. In those cases, it could reflect something a little bit broader about how you respond to stress, and I definitely don't want to play psychologist or doctor here. The only thing I do want to say is I think it would be a little bit disingenuous of me if I didn't mention the fact that but many performers that I'm aware of who perform even at a higher level have at some point or currently do use things such as small doses of beta blockers to help them with the physiological responses to anxiety. And I'm not suggesting it, I'm only saying that it's sort of an open secret among musicians that this is a fairly common thing. And it's a trade-off. Definitely something that I'm not recommending, but if you really are having these serious responses, you might want to talk to your doctor and just see if there's another option there. I would definitely try personally, again, I'm not a doctor, but personally, I would try the meditation, the mindfulness, the preparing for the lesson first. But if you just find that, oh my gosh, I simply can't function, it's either this or I'm going to quit, you might want to talk to a doctor. I would definitely not do anything rash. But I have known people for whom that's a game changer. So it would be disingenuous or dishonest for me not to pretend that does not exist. So anyway, I hope you find this information helpful. If nothing else, it might be helpful to know that almost everyone gets nervous. Even professionals get extremely nervous sometimes. So don't feel like you're weird for feeling that way, but there are strategies like mindfulness, preparing, playing for people, and sometimes more drastic things under the supervision of a doctor, of course, that you might find helpful in dealing with nervousness in lessons and other situations. So I hope that helps. Would love to hear your comments and other questions. And if you have other suggestions or questions about this topic, let me know. And I will see y'all in the next video.